Okay, it looks like we're on. Are we on? I feel on. Am I on? I'm on. I'm on. Yeah, okay. I'll take it. I'm on. I am on. Hey everybody, it's Mike Meyers, your absolute most favorite tech in the whole world, here with the Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2 o'clock Central Daylight Time, Ask Mike Anything. The function of this particular live stream is to provide folks an opportunity, especially for those of us who are kind of isolated by the COVID virus, an opportunity to work on our CompTIA certifications. In particular, this will be IT Fundamentals, CompTIA A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. Although we could certainly go outside that. That's where our bailiwick is right there. But so the idea is to give you guys the information you need to help you pass those certifications. We also can go in any kind of tech topic you want. Really completely comfortable with just about anything, and I'm also comfortable telling you I don't know. The goal of this AMA is Ask Mike Anything, so we're very much driven by the questions that you provide to me. So there's two ways to get questions to me. First of all, you can just type it into the live chat here in the stream itself, and we'll be watching that. Your other alternative is to simply email me. So here's my contact information. You can contact me at either one of those two email addresses. I should just put one there. I don't know why I wrote in two, but now my arms are broken and I can't change it. If you're a gamer, look me up on Steam. I'm Senor Pepe. This is my office number. Unfortunately, as long as coronavirus is on there, it is pretty well screened. But if you absolutely positively got to get a hold of me, you can call me through there. But honestly, the best way to get a hold of me is just send me an email. And if we need to talk, then I'll probably just send you my cell phone. We can talk anytime you want. And when in doubt, just type in the word DesWeds. I am DesWeds at just about everything. DESWEDS. Type it on a keyboard with your left hand. You don't even have to move your mouse off the right hand. A kinetic acronym. How weird is that? Anyway, so I got a surprisingly small number of emails this week. I'm going to double check, make sure I didn't miss anything critical. My buddy Diego got himself a job working with Tech Systems. Very exciting for him, so congratulations there. Problem is, Diego, I don't know what your nom de plume is on the live stream, so I always get nervous. I don't want to use last names or anything where people might dox you accidentally. And I've got a few questions on just how to do A+ stuff. More to double check. Okay, nope. Nothing absolutely super critical. Okay, all right, so anyway, what did I promise? What did I overpromise for this week? It was going to be, okay, IPv6, which I'm ready to do something like that. I was really hoping I was going to get some command line questions, but I didn't get any from you guys. So I'm not in a particular panic to do command line interface. I'm glad to do it, but I'd rather talk about individual commands. I mean, if we really need to do a very basic, why is there a command line? I'm prepared to do that, but DISM. Okay, we could probably do DISM. Write that one down, see if I can remember. All right. So anyway, keep in mind the duration of this AMA is 2 hours or until the questions run out. So if we reach a point where there's no more questions, then we'll be finished for the day, and then I'll see you Wednesday. But if the questions keep going and we make it all the way to 4 o'clock my local time, then fantastic. We can do either one. So, oh, there's Diego. All right, hey, congratulations, man. Well done. Diego Medina, gainfully employed. Let's see how we're doing here. How was my weekend? Busy. Always busy. Alan Duggan studying Sec Plus. And Andy also studying for the Sec Plus. Good for you guys. Well done. All right, Diego, you actually use your real, I assume it's your real name. We may not know, but good, good, good. All right. Powell Lakowski. Hey, Mike, just passed my A+ a few days ago. Congratulations, Powell. Well done, sir. Big round of applause to you. Mido Ghanem. Here he is, my favorite teacher. Oh, go on with you. What avatar is the Senor Pepe? Oh, gosh. I just put that... I've been Senor Pepe since like the day Steam was formed. But now is there some Pepe the Frog thing I got to be careful about? I didn't even think about that. Ugh. I can't keep up with the political correctness anymore, kids. I try. What is my avatar? I don't remember. Brandon Boran, what are your thoughts on age and getting into this field? You probably want to be 18, although I've seen some people get in younger than that. Adam Topfer, I was going through all the CLI stuff on the A+ today. Okay, cool, excellent. Mito, I check my email constantly. You sent me something? Oh, I do see it now. Okay, so Mito, I actually was reading this and kind of skipped over it a little bit. What is the best way to purchase the vouchers for A+? I know your website is much cheaper than the CompTIA website. I don't know if I'd call it much cheaper. It's about a 10% discount. So, you know, there's a couple of ways to get vouchers. Like, for example, if you're in a school program right now, if you're not an individual or if you can affiliate with a school, a lot of schools have their E2 Education to Schools or whatever it's called, their school program that CompTIA offers, which offers very discounted vouchers. But you have to be in a school, and the school has to be part of this program. You would know because you're attending a school, and you could talk to your instructor and ask that question. But if you're individual schmooze like us, you're going to have to buy vouchers from somebody. Buy them from me, and I'll greatly appreciate it. www.totalsem.com. Now, you got to be careful with these vouchers because the thing about these vouchers is that they often only work in the United States. So if you're going to buy a voucher like from us, is United States and Canada, I think? You have to double check that. So you're going to have to, you know, double check that stuff with whoever you buy your vouchers from. Okay. What other question do you have for me here? Mito. You want to talk with me on the phone and pick my brain. WhatsApp. I will not put WhatsApp on my phone. It is a security disaster and I won't touch it. We could probably work out something else if you want to talk on the phone, but give me some questions you want to talk about, man, because that's really the important thing. I'm always glad to talk, but I get in trouble because some people are like, oh, I just love to talk to you on the phone. And I'm like, okay, here's my number. And then they call me and they're like, hi, yeah, I just want to talk to you and say hi. It's like, dude, it's not that I don't appreciate it, it's just that I'm a busy beaver, to say the least, and it's tough for me to do that. So, ask me a question. No. Andrew Hutz. Hey, Mike. Hey, Andrew. Why is it, Andre, my good European friend, why is it still important to learn command lines when you can do most of the things in your OS? Well, the command line is part of the OS. Andre, there's zillions of things that you may not be able to do from the GUI. The command line can always be there. Even in Windows, I can get to a command line through the repair installation sometimes if the GUI itself doesn't come up. In Linux, I would say to you, you cannot do most of the things in the graphical user interface. To be comfortable with Linux, you would definitely have to be working within a command line. Command lines give more flexibility, command line gives more freedom. Command lines can often be more powerful than similar GUI tools. Oh, Brandon, you're on the old, you're 48? That's nothing, man. I would assume then you're a corporate retrainer then, Brandon. The big thing I would tell you, that I tell everybody when I hear what older folks, is that you already have decades of experience. You've been doing something, I hope, you know. And when you decide to move into IT as an older person, when you don't forget what you already know. I know people who've been in the trucking industry. They hurt their back, they can't, you know, turn a wrench anymore, but they understand trucks. And then when they get in IT, then they go back and instead of twisting wrenches, they're typing on keyboards, but working on applications that help the trucks run better, designing tool sets. You'd be surprised how much still gets done in Excel these days, things like that. So, you know, that would be the biggest piece of advice I'd have to give you is, you know, you would be shocked at what you could probably jump back into, staying in the industries that you knew and hopefully loved, except now you're coming at it from the IT side. So, plus, you know, you probably have connections, people you know, stuff like that. Network Mage, question, is using Quad 9 DNS, Quad 9? I have no idea what you're talking about, man. I'm just searching for Quad 9. I'm going to have to research it a little bit more to be able to give you a good answer. Scott Jernigan is telling me that Quad 9 means that you're just using the DNS record 9.9.9.9. That is not, oh, okay, I see it. Hang on. I'm not familiar with this. Okay, yes, Scott, you're right. It's just using, instead of the default DNS server that comes from your ISP, instead using 9.9.9.9 as your DNS server. Okay, I think I see what's happening here. All right, so when you're doing DNS, one of the big problems we run into is that if we use the default DNS server that comes down from our ISP, that DNS server can often be a real problem child. Like for example, my default DNS server here in my house is provided by AT&T, and it starts doing weird things. Like if I type in an incorrect name, you know, I want to type in www.global.com or something like that, it'll intercept that as an invalid domain name and instead put me into this AT&T with all this advertising, did you mean? That kind of a thing. The other problem is, of course, is that anytime you have a DNS record, you have a chance that you have bad DNS in there, in particular pointing you to dangerous places. This is always a bit of a problem, and especially if you're using public DNS servers like the famous Google 8.8.8.8 or 8.8.4.4, there's always the risk that you could be pointed to something like this. So this Quad 9 basically is a group of people who trust each other on DNS and create themselves what they call a threat list of naughty places, and that theoretically that should help. I have never used Quad 9. It looks interesting. I mean, once I look at the concept, it seems pretty straightforward. And all you do is You go into your, well, probably into your DHCP server on your home router or your small office router, and instead of passing out whatever the default DNS is, have them pass out 9.9.9.9. This, of course, assumes you don't have internal DNS servers and you're not trying to run Active Directory or something else that's leaning on that. But I'll tell you what, more fun than that, I'm going to give it a try, and I'll get back to you guys. It's cool too, man. I did not know about 9.9.9. Thank you very much. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff there. Quad 9. Would it protect your machine from DNS poisoning? Yeah, I mean, if you've got if again, I don't know these guys, if all the members of Quad 9 are actively and in a real-time basis keeping your DNS queries clean, and if they're checking they check your internal DNS cache as well. I'm just reading. That would be cool. And I mean, nobody could guarantee that you would never have DNS poisoning, but I'll bet it would cut it way down. Raven Hampton, thanks for everything you do. I passed 1001 and 1002 is tomorrow. All right, Raven, I'm going to give you half a circle because you haven't passed the other one yet, but you have passed 1001. Congratulations to you on that. Let's go ahead and get 1002 done tomorrow. Danny Schiff, did Mike already answer the IP question? I joined late. Answer the IP question. No, just ask it again. Brandon Swenson, hey Mike, can you explain universal plug and play and if it's a security risk? Sure. I'm going to take a quick peek at my router for something. Hang on. I even have that setting. Just by coincidence, I did happen to have I am looking. Do I have any UPnP settings within this router itself? Looks like I do not. Okay. All right. Just because I know Scott Jernigan's is listening, is it universal or? Yeah, universal plug and play. All right. So UPnP came out a number of years ago because we had a lot of devices out there that we wanted to make more auto-configurable. I mean, the dream was things like printers, wired printers could be automatically configured and things like that. UPnP is really, not only does it allow for configuration, but it also allows for discovery. UPnP is still out there. I don't use it much, and nor do I see much call for it. I remember a number of years ago there were some complaints about its security. Not so much because UPnP was a problem. It was just it gave away a lot of information a little too easily. And in my opinion now, with things like Layer 2 discovery protocol, simple service discovery protocol, all these other protocols. And you know, the end result of all these protocols is you go in, if you're in a Windows, you go into your network and all of a sudden you can see your router icons and stuff like that. That's really about all that is. I do not use UPnP. I don't even think it is by default still even in Windows 10. Man, just Microsoft has such a hard time getting rid of anything, so I'm going to assume that it is still there. So I would not consider it a big security risk in the overall scheme of things right now. Danny Shift, Mike, can you explain how to be a Doctor 101? If it's a joke, ha ha ha. If it's not a joke, I don't understand what you're asking. So Quad 9 has an encrypted, I'm looking at, Looks like Quad 9 is an NPO. I love acronyms. NPO, what the hell does that mean? Nonprofit organization? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to be playing with the triple nine, quadruple nine. Let me get scrolled back where everybody was. Stephen G, what's cooking good lookins? Any news on getting NASA swag? Yeah, you know, I gave that website a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember what the website is, and it's kind of on you. They have what they have and what they don't have. I haven't looked at it since the last time we talked. I guess I could pull that URL back up. PvP boy, hey Mike. The operational procedures section of the A+ seems quite vague. What is it really trying to focus on? Operational procedures. Well, PvP boy, if it's vague, that's telling you something right there. You know, when in doubt, always look at practice questions as an idea of what we should be focusing on. Yeah, this is, you know, I got to stress something. I don't put junk or filler in anything that I do. Remember, there's 4 things that you have to teach people in the IT world. Number 1, you got to teach them what's on the exam. Number 2, you got to teach them what's going to make them a better tech, whether it's on the exam or not, I don't care. Number 3, you have to teach them stuff that they don't need to know. Because if I fail to teach certain topics, you will feel cheated because I didn't cover it. Caching be a great example of that. Level 1, level 2, level 3 caching. And I could go a lot deeper, but you don't need to know it. And then the number 4 reason is CIC, because it's cool. Sometimes I teach stuff just because it's fascinating and should be in there. So those are the only... Anything that I put in any of my training material has to meet one of those 4 criteria. I'm not particularly motivated. You know, I don't write books. You see so many people out there, like when they're writing books or they're making videos, they look at the CompTIA objectives, which are not written in a teaching order. They're just written in a kind of a, I don't even know what to describe how CompTIA puts their objectives. If you're going for a CompTIA exam and you're not going to www.comptia.org and you're not downloading the objectives from CompTIA, I think you're making a terrible mistake. And it's not just for CompTIA. All IT certs have an objectives form that's issued by the testing body, which anybody can read. And you should be looking at those things and you know, helping you understand. You can even judge my books. Is Mike covering objective 5.2 or whatever it is? Anyway, so along with that, I'm going to teach stuff that is going to meet one of those 4 criteria. I want to make you a better tech. Sometimes it's cool, and sometimes I have to teach you something you don't need to know because you're not going to believe me that you don't need to know it until I march through it. In fact, that's going to happen today when we do IPv6. Here's Scott's Journey again, helping me out. Okay, here we go. My question is, if the IP 10.0. something is private, then why is 8.0.0 something public? Okay. Shouldn't it be private? So Danny, you're thinking to yourself, I'm trying to march through your logic here, brother. So you see something, if 10.0 is private, then you think 8.0 is private. No. The answer to that is when they set aside private addresses for IPv4 back in the day, they picked one Class A address, which is 10. anything, one Class B address, well, one range of Class B addresses, which is going to be 172.16 to 172.32. I forget exactly where that is. And then one Class C address, which is 192.168. You pick the third value, but pick one, and .0. Other than that, all other addresses are public. So the reason that 10 is private and 8 is public is because the elders of the internet said it is so. So 8 dot whatever Class A is public, 9 dot whatever Class A is public, 11 dot whatever Class A is public, but they reserved 10 dot just for private networks. That's it. So the other question I tend to get is when people start getting a little confusion on this is they'll go, okay, now wait a minute, Mike. So I've got this private IP address, but it's 10.3.6 WAC 24. But I thought 10 was Class A. Well, 10.10.0.0.0 WAC 8 is Class A, but you can subnet any Class A into whatever you want, any Class B into whatever you want. You can subnet Class Cs. Now, if you wanted to have a 192.168.4.224 WAC, I can do this in my head, WAC 28 address. That's a subnet of a Class C. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Because the elders of the internet said so. That's why 172.16.0.0 to 172.31.255.255. Always have trouble with those darn Class Bs. Okay. Russ Morgan, just a heads up, I just bought 2 vouchers and the thank you page looks like the CSS is messed up. I think I was using Chrome at the time. Russ, Scott Jernigan, you please tell Michael Smyer right now about that if you haven't already. Oh, looks like Scott already had responded. Look at, what a guy. What a machine. Network Mage, question. How hard is it for a private person who gets security clearance? Lots of the security analyst jobs require one. It's not hard. It's just mind-bendingly expensive. You don't go get your own security clearance. Maybe if you landed a $10 million contract with the Department of Justice here in the States, yeah, then maybe you could go get it. But it's going to cost you a minimum of $85,000 to get a top secret clearance. And I don't think that, like the Department of, here in the United States, the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice, their secret clearances are completely different. It's like if you're in the Air Force and you have a top secret, then you try to go over to the FBI, you have to go through all the rigmarole all over again. So it's very hard to do. You have to have a reason. And most of, I would be surprised, at Network Mage, I'm not going to challenge you on this because I haven't been looking lately, but most jobs assume that you will they will provide you the security clearance. I've never seen, something like that. Tom Jeffrey, Mike, in my bias, I have something called DOCP. DOCP. DOCP in the DOCP is an ASUS BIOS feature on AMD platforms that translate the XMP, which is Intel, settings to AMP forms. XMP is an Intel Tech introduction to automatically set DRAM to intended data rates over and above a base level for DDR3, 69 over DDR4. I have seen that XMP feature, and just because I'm not an overclocker anymore, I tend to ignore it. I'm pretty sure I understand what they're trying to do there, and that is when you're overclocking anything, it's a pain in the rear end. And one of the biggest problems of overclocking is that when you start bumping your CPU, you almost always have to overclock the RAM as well. We just always did it manually, going through the old RAM timings, and it was, tried this, froze up, tried that, went for a minute and a half, then froze up. You just kept geeking with it. I have not used the XMP for adjusting RAM, but it looked like it's kind of like we will help you overclock your RAM. And now to get your question answered, does this activate the XMP, and could you talk? Yeah, yes, Tom, that's what it is for. It just translates the XMP profile into something that your AMD system can read, and the only reason you would do that is if you're overclocking. D. Wiggins, can you get a support job without A+? Somewhere, I'm sure you can. I'm studying A+, but it won't be able to take the test for a while. Yeah, I mean, people can get jobs. Look, we're desperate for techs out there, and there's work for those who are willing to find it. There's work for those who are willing to go to the work. There's work for those who are willing to work the weird hours. And there are places, I can't think of any national ones. Fry's Electronics used to be one, although Fry's is kind of fading these days, where you'd get a job with them and then they go, well, you need to get your A+. They'd give you like 6 months. They wouldn't pay for it, but other folks would. So the answer is sure. Look, the only thing the A+ does is it puts a little badge on your chest so that people have some understanding that you have at least some kind of base skills. A+ is never going to get you a job. Never. No certification will ever get you a job. The only thing certifications can do is put your name at the top of the stack of resumes when the human resources people are looking through them. That's their big job. Mike, are you a certified hacker? No. Not sure there really is this thing as a certified hacker. And what are your thoughts on FISA? Which FISA? Are you talking about FISA warrants for anti-terrorism here in the United States? I'm all for it. Get a little nervous about some of the FISA warrants, but in general, I think that the Department of Justice does a very good job on FISA warrants and is interested in the security and privacy of the American citizens. Now, you start talking about the NSA and some of the stuff they've been doing, that goes outside the scope of FISA, in my opinion. Steve G, beep, beep, bap, bap. Just reading through, guys. Mike, do you have any diagnostic tools for troubleshooting batteries, whether it's laptops, phones, or tablets? For troubleshooting a battery? No, I don't. The one thing I will say about batteries is that people think, lithium-ion batteries last forever, and they don't. I mean, if you read the stats, most lithium-ion batteries, especially on some device that's being cycled once or twice or more per day, if they last 2 years, you're looking great. This is why so many devices, especially smartphones, you're going to have to find yourself replacing these guys. And but in terms of actually testing the battery itself, some batteries have a self-test light on them. I've seen those, but I'm not familiar with anything that could test a battery. I mean, every battery is going to be different anyway, right? I mean, it's not like there's some industry battery standard. And the only thing you're really going to be looking at is how long can the battery hold. This is the only thing I care about, is how long can that battery hold the base charge it needs to be able to boot up your whatever system you have. And I know when the battery reaches that point because my device shuts down. So, for me, it's all about battery life. Like this Fitbit that I bought, I'm convinced that Fitbit has a built-in 13-month fail rate into these things, planned obsolescence. Oh, it also has a 12-month warranty. So it'll fail in 13 months because the battery, you know, when you first buy this thing, I can go 3 days, 4 days without recharging the battery on the phone, on the watch. But after about 13 months, you can't charge it hardly anymore. But again, there's no diagnostic for that. Are aliens real? Okay, Danny. Adam Topher. Quad 9 offers DNS over TLS. Remember, you can't go over TLS, right? You can just authenticate with TLS. I'm going to have to look at all this stuff. Can I get a free book for telling you about Quad 9? No. But that almost as good as that. I can tell you about this week's special. All you have for this week. Hang on, want to make sure I'm telling the truth. All right, so this special is you get 50% off all of our super bundles, which is going to be videos, practice questions, and simulations. You get half off on those, 50%. Or if you just want to buy practice questions, you get half off on those just as well. All you have to do is go to www.totalsem.com and type in the code MMLive615. My buddy Scott will put it up there so everybody can read it. And we'll get it for you for half off. And also keep in mind, remember on Fridays, Network Mage, I'm always giving stuff away. So just show up on Fridays. And I definitely give books away on Fridays. Oh, here come the questions. Yeah, again, guys, I don't see the questions as they come up. I have to keep scrolling up and down, and then all of a sudden it's like, brrr, there's a whole bunch of them. But that's cool stuff. Nubian Queen, message retracted, sold. PvP boy. I know Office 365 is becoming quite popular. Could you explain it? Sure. Office 365 is Microsoft software as a service, cloud-based Microsoft Office. It's actually more than that. But keeping it simple, at least for starters, it provides you a set of it's Office tools. It's PowerPoint, it's Word, it's Excel, it's and the rest. You log on, and you can use cloud-based software, but you can also download it on up to 5 different machines. And on an individualized basis, I still think it's $99 a year. And you can download it on up to 5 different machines, wink, wink. So it's a great deal there. You get a ton of online cloud storage with Microsoft OneDrive. A lot of little benefits and tools to it. For our office, we've moved to Office 365. There was a lot of problems we had trying to use traditional Office at Total Seminars. Like, not everybody would upgrade at the same time because we're kind of a little sloppy on that. We'd have different Windows versions and things like that, so that took care of all that pretty much instantly. Also, we were using very old school mail servers, like 2002 style mail servers. And with our Office 365, which is like $15 per month per head, just to give you an idea, we could have a cloud-based Exchange server, so we could really have good control on our email, stuff like that. You get the Teams application, which is really popular. Probably for most offices, that's probably 20% of the reason just to go to Office 365 is the Teams app has chat tools and organizational stuff, and you can do basically Zoom meetings within Teams that is very nice, very stable. Yeah, it's good stuff. If you're if you're going to be using Microsoft Office tools, you probably ought to give Office 365 a good hard look. Also has some great student deals, and again, you can install it onto 5 different systems. Mike, were you on the military? No, I was never on the military. I was never in the military either. Yeah, no, I've always been a civilian. I've been to almost every Navy, Air Force, and Army base in the United States and some overseas as a civilian instructor, but nope, never had to salute. And I was in the Civil Air Patrol for a while. Nubian Queen, hiya Mike, could you tell me the best way to get an IT support job without any commercial experience? Okay, man, I'd have so many questions for you for starters there. People are telling me my microphone is acting naughty. Let's see if we can adjust it a little bit better. How's that? How's that, Scott? Okay, we'll give it another try here. Me and sound, God bless it. All right. Man, Nubian Queen, I got a lot of questions for you. Nubian Queen, do me a favor, send me an email. Send it to michaelm@totalsim.com or desweds@protonmail. And when you send me the email, be sure to put Nubian Queen in there so I remember who you are, because I would like to talk to you in more details about your situation, especially with a computer science degree. I would think that you would be very much in demand. Michael Q, you're like my Network Plus book. Thank you. I am using your CompTIA and Udemy in your book. Do you have any advice on taking the tests? Oh, Seth, I always have advice on taking the tests. Let's deal with Seth. Okay, number one, Seth. So taking a CompTIA test, there's a couple of things that are important. Number one, when you sit down for the CompTIA test, now I'm assuming your question is the taking of the test. That's what it says. Okay, so number one, you need to understand that it's basically a multiple choice exam. However, there are the performance-based questions, which are almost always at the beginning of the exam. So you sit down, you go through a login rigmarole. This, I'm assuming you're going to a Prometric View Testing Center. So you go through the rigmarole of getting logged in and all that, and the test pops. First thing is you go through this huge non-disclosure agreement. You don't have to read it all, but when the non-disclosure agreement is not timed, so you could read every page. You could sit there for 3 hours and read that thing if you wanted to. You go through the non-disclosure agreement. Basically, it's pretty straightforward. They don't want you to lie, cheat, or steal. So you check off on that. And then there's some basic instructions on how the test itself actually works, moving forward, marking questions for later, stuff like that. And then, boom, you go into these performance-based questions. The performance-based questions are, in my opinion, usually very simple. It's just that you're not used to the interface and how they look, and sometimes that can be confusing. Just take your time and think about it for a minute. A lot of times this stuff gets much easier. CompTIA is notorious for making big, long, drawn-out questions where actually one little sentence in these 2 paragraphs is all you need to be able to answer the whole thing. So you always want to take your time with that. The performance-based questions, while you should be taking your time with them, can also be extremely time-consuming. So you really want to watch the clock, and don't let yourself spend too much time on the performance-based questions. Usually, depending on the exam, but like with A+, you have 90 minutes. Pretty sure that's right. 90 minutes to take the exam. You don't want to be sitting there for 45 minutes and you've only done 3 questions. That's the first one. So you get to the performance-based, then you get to the old school multiple choice, A, B, C, or D. The CompTIA questions are pretty good these days. They used to be kind of horrible, but CompTIA is doing a better job with them. But CompTIA, part of that NDA that you signed is that they go, we have the right to put in what they call beta questions. These are ungraded questions. And it depends on the exam and how long the exam's been out. But you can end up getting hit with, 1, 2, 7 of these questions. And they're usually right at the beginning of the multiple choice questions. And invariably these questions, you're like, what? It's like, Mike Meyers has terrible training material because I've never seen these questions before. Look, man, I cover all the topics. I'm not going to say I cover every question, but I certainly cover all the topics well. And especially at the beginning of the exam, if you see these questions that you're like coming out of right field on, they're beta questions. So don't panic, okay? Be cool. And try to answer them as best you can, all right? But they're just beta questions that are not even graded. All right. So then once you start actually taking the exam itself, so, it might be the second question or the seventh, who knows. CompTIA is pretty notorious for having one question which will answer another question. So, I don't want to turn this into a how to take multiple choice exams, lesson, but, you go through the first time, hit all the easy ones, go through the second time, hit your 50-50s, go through the third time, and hit the hard ones. That's generally my rule. So, I'm going through all these questions 3 times, well, not all of them. Hopefully, most of that first set and, so you go through them a lot. The other thing you have to watch out for is you definitely need practice questions. And I'm not trying to steal all your money. In fact, I'm giving 50% off practice questions. But you really need to go through practice questions. And then worse than that is you really can't just use a single source for your practice questions. Because I write my own practice questions and they have a tone to them. So you'll go in, you like memorize all my practice questions, and you sit for the exam and you get to question 42 and you're like, oh, I know the answer, that's B. It's like, no, it's not B, man. Read the question. It's a little different. I don't copy CompTIA questions. I'd get in a lot of trouble if I did, and I wouldn't be doing you any favors if I did. So you want to read the question, understand where the question's coming from, and then make your answer that way. And that's why it's often good to have another source for your practice questions, because they'll have a different tone to it. So you'll look at, and this happens to everybody when you sit down, and it's not just CompTIA, it's any IT certification. You sit down and you're reading the question, you're like, well, I kind of know. Sort of, yeah, kind of, but it feels different. The reason it feels different is because you've been memorizing a single pile of practice questions, and when you run up to it, now if you read it carefully, you'll be able to figure it out. But the reality of the situation is that if you've got 2 sources of practice questions, it really helps you be more comfortable and flexible with those types of questions. The other thing I would tell you is that nobody cares what your score is. People are always, it's D for diploma, man. You're never going to meet a hiring manager who's like, oh, so what was your score on the CompTIA Plus? They just like to see it at the bottom. So that's the other thing. Keep in mind is that you instantly, so you finish the exam, right? And then you have to go through this god-awful, what do they call it? What rate your experience? Are you male or female, or poll, or whatever you want to call it? And it's because you want to know what your score is, and it's like, okay, I finished the exam. Now you're going to make me take this stupid poll. Keep in mind, you can always say, choose not to answer, choose not to answer, choose not to answer. But you can do whatever you want there. Once that's done, and you finish that, boom, you get the score. It's right there on the screen, pass or fail, so you'll know. If you pass, fantastic, good for you. If you fail, though, and people do fail, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, this isn't an SAT or your O-levels or something you really only get to take once, or something if you take it more than once you'll be compared. People fail certifications all the time. I fail at least a third of my certification tests, and other than the inconvenience of time and money, nobody cares. No one's going to ask you how many times you took the Net Plus. They don't care. They just want to see it at the bottom. And so if you fail, then you just reschedule and take it again. Network Mage. Last time I tried to download Cain and Abel Cracker, the website was unsecured. Has anyone put it on a site that is secured yet? Cain and Abel. I know Windows really hates downloading it. I'm finding lots of places online to download it. Also the story of Cain and Abel from the Bible. So I'm on Oxid, oxid.it, and I'm on a secure website. Burp, 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 burp. So there you go. Matthew Payne, Mike, thank you for your videos. Got a, oh yeah, Matthew, look at you, A+, Net Plus, and Security Plus. Just reading. Nubian Queen, you got some connectivity there. Still, I want you to email me. E. White, really? There's a cost to getting security clearance. Somebody's got to pay for it. But yes, I am unfamiliar with anybody who had to open up a wallet and pay for their own security clearance here in the United States. I've never heard that done. I've seen small companies that had to do it for their employees. You have to have a reason to get a clearance. You can't just, gee, I feel like a clearance, you know. So that's part of the process, is that, you know, either the Department of Defense or Department of Justice is going to want to know, why do you want this? You know, so it's a big deal, kids. I'll tell you right now. The last time I had to deal with a security clearance, I had guys knocking on my door, and this wasn't my security clearance, this was somebody else's, knocking on my door and asking a lot of questions about people I knew well in a detail that I was surprised that they knew. So it's a serious thing. Technology is cool, Danny Shift. I completely agree. Oh, you're 20? Ah, dude, you're a baby. You've got your whole life in front of you, young man. You're good. Minogetum, I have a hard time memorizing the 802.11 bands. G, B, A, G, A, B, A, C, N. N. Is there any trick or acronym? No. Yeah, see, that's the problem, Mito. I don't like that stuff. Everybody, they bring this up, and then I can never remember what the name of those are. Every good boy does fine. Do you remember the notes of a scale? Stuff like that. I just use it so much that there's really no memorization. You know? So, sorry, man. Yeah, Andre, I absolutely agree. Flashcards are a good way to go. Dovia, does the CompTIA A+ exam cost vary from country to country? I believe it does. Yes. How much, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like Network Mage is mentioning things like doing free work for people. There's nothing wrong with that, and you can certainly put that on a resume. People forget that in lieu of hard job experience, that type of stuff is good. And the cool part is that somebody like Network Mage, if he's been doing stuff like this, like threat vulnerability assessments, it wouldn't take a hiring manager very long through a technical interview for Network Mage to show that he has the chops. So yeah, that is a very good way to do it. So Alex Day is asking, after Net Plus, where do I go, Linux Plus or CCNA? It's really a matter of personal choice. So there's a certain point where there is no perfect linear set of certifications to take. There's a certain point where you need to be gunning for that which interests you. What is interesting is that for most higher skilled technical people, both being a Cisco person as well as being a Linux person is pretty much assumed. So I don't think you could go wrong in either direction. How are we doing on time? It's almost an hour into this already. We got some IPv6 to do today, kids. G Sing, studying for A+. Wanted to ask you, Mike, do I need to remember each and every process for Windows tools like regedit? Each and every process? No. Generally, like for example, like a tool, you should know what regedit is. You should know what event viewer is. You should know what device manager is. You should know what disk management is, local users and groups, because we use them like all the time. If you're not using them all the time, then you need to be using them all the time. So it's not like what they're going to ask you is, why do we do this? What functions would take place with this tool versus next? Or I need this information. Which tool do I go to? One thing I will tell you, it's on the exam, especially for the command line, is they'll say, here is the output from a tool. Which one? And you should be able to not only be able to run like netstat, for example, but also be able to understand what the output is. Netstat, netview, stuff like that. That's pretty much exclusively Windows tools, though. Okay, all right, cool. All right, guys, so let us dive into some IPv6. So the IPv6 we're going to hit today is the stuff that you would probably see on A+. You'd see it on A+, and all of this would be on Net+, although we'll try to go a little bit deeper. I only want to go so far today because I want you guys to be able to digest some of this IPv6 and think about it a little bit, and then hopefully come Wednesday or maybe Friday even, depending on where the questions come in, we can take it a step further. So let's talk about IPv6 for a little bit, shall we? Okay. So first of all, when we talk about IP addressing, the classic 192.168.4. whatever type addresses, that classic address that we know and love, that's IPv4. Don't ask me about IPv version 1, 2, 3, or 5 because I don't know where they are. IPv4 has been around now for north of 30 years. It has powerfully withstood the test of time in a very, very impressive way. But IPv4 has had, and we've known this for over 20 years, some serious limitations because IPv4 was never really designed for the internet that we know and love. And you can actually look at some of the early first generation RFCs for IPv4, and they were talking about, the internet could one day reach up to 10,000 computers. So they wanted something that was very flexible, and it had a lot of interesting features. But IPv4 has really hit the end of its lifespan. IPv4 was never designed for security. IPv4 only has 4 billion addresses, but those addresses are so wasted that huge swaths of them are unavailable. We have a gazillion devices out there, phones and IoT and desktops and laptops and who knows what. And we were starting to really quickly run out of IPv4 addresses. The introduction and the NAT, as that began to come along, primarily as we began to see the first generation of wireless routers from like Linksys and folks like that. You know, before Linksys came along, very few people had networks in their homes. Pretty much everybody had one computer that was hooked to the internet on a dial-up or on an old school DSL. But when Linksys came along with their famous, well, it probably centered around the WRT54G, that famous black and blue home router with the 2 antennas that we all seen. They really got the idea of home networking to really kick in, and certainly within small offices that took place as well. And the use of NAT and private IP addresses really saved us, because if that hadn't come along where every little computer in your office had to have its own public IP address, we would have been gone, you know, by the early 2000s. So anyway, bottom line is there are no more IPv4 addresses to pass out. And starting about 20 years ago, they started to come up with an alternative to IPv4 called IPv6. IPv6 has a lot broader address range. Instead of being 32-bit, it's 128-bit. How many addresses is that, Mike? That would be the air molecules for every molecule on air molecule on Earth would have its own IP address. And then you could add 6 more Earths. So if we had 7 Earths with IPv6, the address space of 128 bits, that is a lot of addressability. So that's good. But there was a lot of other problems with IPv4. And there's like, you know, while we're doing this IPv6 thing, maybe we could fix a few other things as well. So IPv6 has some wonderful features to it. For example, IPv6, pretty much all of the individual systems auto-configure themselves. So the idea of, imagine everybody having an APIPA address that worked, you know, and DHCP is almost obsolete, although unfortunately DHCP, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, DHCP still hangs on, but usually more for specific situations with IPv6. So automatic, robust. IPv6 was originally designed, if you ever heard of IPsec? IPsec was designed for IPv6. And originally the idea of IPv6, you had layer 3 security, but that kind of fell by the wayside. IPsec still works. You can do it if you want, but nobody does. So IPv6 is good stuff, you know, way much more than just more IP addresses. It's a very, very powerful tool. Concept of subnet masking kind of disappears with IPv6. Lots of cool things like that. It's great stuff. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look. I got a little PowerPoint here we can check out. And let's talk about IPv6. First of all, today I just want to get the basics knocked out. So let's take a look at IPv6 addresses. Before I get into this, if you're at a computer where you could open up a command line and run like ipconfig, that would be a very good thing for you to be doing right now. If you don't, I've got it all up here. I can do it for you, but man, if you had a desktop system or a laptop and you could get to a command line, that'd be good stuff. Has to be Windows for the way I'm going to do it, but you could do most of this. You could do all of it on a Linux box as well if you were comfortable with the Linux commands. Anyway, let's get back to the presentation. All right, so it's 128-bit addresses, which is a lot. The nomenclature uses 32 hexadecimal characters. And guys, I don't know if you know hex. I'm hoping you do. but one hex character equals 4 bits. So you've got 4 times 32 equals 128. So all of these hex characters are grouped into 8 groups of 4. So there's 4 hexadecimal characters, then another 4, then another 4, and there's 8 groups of these, and they're called hextets. There's other names for them too, but CompTIA calls them hextets, and so do I. And they're separated by colons, so here's an example. So let's take a look at that address, okay? So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hextets, and they're all separated by colons. If you take the A+ or the Net+, there are certain questions on there that'll be like, which one of these is a valid IPv6 address? So keep in mind, of course, that hexadecimal characters only go to F, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, F, D, E, F. So if you saw J in there, that would not be valid. Keep in mind that you have 8 hextets separated by 7 colons, not semicolons, not dots. Okay? So there you go. Let's dive back in. All right. Now the problem is that IPv6 addresses can be really, really long, as you just saw. So we have ways to abbreviate them. So let's take a look at this typical IPv6 address. So one of the first things you can do is you can drop leading zeros. Do you see right there? There's a leading 0. See right here? There's a leading 0. Those are trailing zeros. You can't touch that. That's a trailing 0. You can't touch that. We can go in here and we can do that. So you can see we've dumped the leading zeros. Now, if you have all zeros in any hextet, you can replace 4 zeros with a single 0. All right, that just cut down tremendously on the number of characters we would have to type, right? Okay. So that is one example. Now, if you have a group of zeros, you can replace them with a double colon. So let's try one real quick. You guys ready? Stare at that for a minute, because we're about to abbreviate it, but we're going to abbreviate it together. Man, if you had a pen and paper right now, you could be scribbling this down, writing down what you think the abbreviation is. So I'll give you a clue. Let's dump the leading zeros. Got it? And because we have this group of 3 zeros in this particular example, we can just turn that into a double colon. So, quiz time. How many hextets are in here? If you didn't see what we started with, how would you know how many hextets are in there? Well, the answer is you know there's supposed to be 8 hextets, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, then that means there were 3 in there. Not too complicated, right? Okay. Now we have different IPv6 address types. So the number one rule you've got to get in your head is that the days of just having one IP address are over, okay? You're going to have different kinds of IPv6 addresses on a single system. First of all, you're going to have your link local address. The link local address is distinct because it's always going to start with FE80, and then it's going to be 3 hextets of 0 after that. So that's always going to be your link local address. Then you're going to have your global unicast, or what most people just call your internet address. The link local address is used to talk within the LAN itself, but the global unicast address is your internet address that's going to be unique to you across the entire internet. And right now they tend to start with 2s, although there is some exceptions to that, but this would be an example of a global unicast address. Now, IPv6 subnet masks are interesting because all subnet masks in what I'm going to call an endpoint LAN are always WAC 64. That's my term, endpoint LAN. Basically, that means the users. You know, the LANs like in your house, that 192.168 that's got your computers and your wireless and your cameras and your Nest thermostats and all that. That means that your subnet mask is always going to be a WAC 64. Remember, it's a 128-bit address. So that means the smallest IPv6 network is going to have 2 to the 64th hosts in it. Now, if you've been hanging out with me for a while, we've looked at a lot of interesting tools here. And one of the tools that we've looked at were network scanners. We could just go out and scan the entire 192.168.4.1 to 192.168.4.254 network, right? Yeah, well, that ain't going to happen when you're scanning, 2 to the 64th hosts. People are like, Mike, why do they make them so big? Okay, there's a couple of things going on here. If 40 years from now they needed to adjust this default, they can. There's no law of physics. It's just the elders of the internet decided that this is where this is going to start. So there's nothing hardwired. We could change this if we wanted to. We'd all have to do it as a world in one fell swoop, but it's not locked in. It gives a lot of security because it's very hard to old school scan an IPv6 network because there's just too many possible addresses. I mean, you might only be using 3 of them, but there's still 2 to the 64th, and it doesn't get any smaller than that. The other thing you need to keep in mind with IPv6 is that the idea of the private IP addresses, that stuff's over, man. I guess you could argue that your link local address is a private address because link local addresses don't go outside your router. But that global unicast address, that's a unique public internet address. So the whole idea of NAT with IPv6 is gone. I mean, there is this weird IPv6 NAT, but I don't want to even talk about it. There's even these weird IPv6 private addresses. I don't even want to get into that. Because nobody I know is doing it. I'm sure there's 3 people on Earth, and they're all watching right now, and they're all going to send me a message going, well, Mike, we're doing that. Anyway, so the idea of NAT is gone. So, NAT only works with private addresses. So a lot of people freak out when they first hear that. They go, whoa, wait a minute, Mike. Without NAT and private IP addresses, I'm now exposed to the internet. Well, friend, you were always exposed to the internet already, okay? To treat NAT as a firewalling feature is foolhardy. I mean, that's not what it was. Of course, there's an argument to say you're being hidden, so you could treat it that way, but it's not. So this is like going back to the old days, like the internet back in the 90s when everybody had public addresses before NAT came along. And the answer is that's why we have good firewalls. And we give you these massive subnets. So scanning and things like that becomes not realistic. It's not something you can do. All right. Let's get back to the PowerPoint. So internet service providers, in general, keep in mind, guys, there is flexibility here, but I'm just trying to get you started. Internet service providers are issued WAC 48 addresses. So they get, if your address is a beginning half and a front half, they get about 2/3 of that front half. Then the ISPs can then issue anything from WAC 50s to WAC 64 network IDs to customers based on needs. So let me show you how this works. So let's say one of the regional internet registries gives this ISP all of the addresses that are 2600:1700:0D00, and then all the rest is whatever this ISP wants to do, WAC 48. Now, that ISP has control of this entire block of addresses now. So we tend to break these in group by 4. So you have a 48, 48, 50, 52, 54, that kind of a thing. So let's just say I got a little tiny customer. This customer is just one little guy. They've only got, all they have is their one router that the ISP is connected to it. So they would probably give him an address like this. So that's the first half of the address right there. You see that? So it's a WAC 64. Now, if I got some big customer who needs more than that, and especially if this big customer has like lots of routers that are internal to their network or whatever, that ISP can pass them out a much bigger address. So they could get everything from 2600, 1700, 0D00, really B5. They could have that entire thing for them on a WAC 56. All right, so let's generate some IPv6 addresses. First of all, if we take a look at this link local address, we know that the first half is FE. Oh, and by the way, this is hexadecimal. Hexadecimal doesn't care whether it's capitalized or uncapitalized. It makes no difference. So FE80 colon 0000 colon 0000 colon 0000, that's the first half. But where does the second half of the link local address come from? Well, we use a standard called EUI64, which basically means it comes from the MAC addresses. So we need 64 more bits, but a MAC address is only 48 bits. So keep in mind, your ISP hands you the first half of your internet address. That FE80, that's generated internally, but even that's only the first half. Where does the second half come from? And it's this EUI thing. Let me show you how this works. So here's a typical MAC address, all right? That's a 48-bit MAC address. If you don't believe me, go on your computer, type ipconfig/all, and you'll see your physical address there. Okay, so the first thing we do is we get rid of the dashes because they're not real, and we insert FFEE right in the middle. You see that? Okay, you don't insert it. Your operating system, as it's booting up, automatically does this for you. You're not part of it. It just appears. So then what we have to do is we have to flip the 7th bit. Now remember, these are hexadecimal characters, so each of those is 4 characters. So the 7th character is somewhere in that 2. So we take the 2, we convert it all the way to binary. So 2 in binary is 00000010. So that's the 7th bit. So we flip it and turn it to 0. So the 2 now becomes a 0. And that is, oh here, we'll go ahead and put in some colons because that's the last half of your address. This is very interesting. So whether it's your link local address or your internet address, the second half of your address, the unique identifier, is generated from the MAC address. Well, that can be cool, right? Because the problem we have with IP addresses is there's no correlation of an IP address to a MAC address, right? I mean, I can type in whatever I want for an IPv4 address, correct? But with IPv6, well, you can actually have a way that correlates an IP address to a physical network card. And that, well, if you're in law enforcement, you're like, yay! But if you're anybody else, you're like, boo! Because it's a privacy issue, I mean, it's a problem. So we had to get around that. So here we go. That's a complete link local address right there. So let's do this again, but let's take a look at ipconfig. All right. So I'm going to type ipconfig on my system here. Let me scroll up. Okay. So what I have here, BC, you guys are not seeing all of that. I've zoomed it in so much so you guys can see everything that I've actually probably zoomed it in a little bit too much. There we go. Okay. So if you take a look here, first of all, here's my link local address. Do you see that? FE80 colon colon. Now, at the very end here, this is a Windows thing. Do you see that %8? That is just a binding. I have so many network cards, virtualized network cards, wireless network cards. I got all kinds of network cards in this system. So Windows uses those % numbers to bind. It says this particular one is going to this particular NIC. That's all that means. There we go. Now, the next thing I want you to look at is you'll see we have an IPv6 address right here, but we also have a temporary IPv6. So there's actually 1, 2, 3 different IPv6 addresses. Look, there's a lot of information right here. Number one, the fact that I have global unicast addresses tells me that I am hooked to the IPv6 internet. That's the first thing. If I only saw my link local address, that tells me that I'm probably not connected to actual IPv6. You got to remember, just because you're connected to the internet, that doesn't mean that your ISP is providing IPv6 addresses. Remember, this all gets trickled down to individual customers, even individual home customers, okay? And if you're not seeing a internet address that starts with a 2 almost certainly, it probably means that your ISP does not offer IPv6 yet. That's extremely rare today. Pretty much all ISPs that I'm aware of, I know in the Houston area, I don't know of any that do not. So you could also then possibly have a problem with the way your router's configured. We're going to try to have enough time to take a look at my router here today. But let me show you something else here. It's kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do real quick, I'm going to run ipconfig again, except this time we're going to go ALL. Remember, the IPv6 address is based on the MAC address, right? Well, can you see everything? Yeah, you can. Okay, so here's my MAC address right here. Do you see that? A8A159060082, right? So 06, remember we put an FFEE in the middle here? So somewhere we should be seeing 060882, right? So look here, 06068. We don't see it any place. Do you see that? Wait a minute, Mike. Didn't you just tell us that the second half of the IPv6 address is based on the MAC address? Yes, but it doesn't have to be. What happened is not too many years after this started coming out, a lot of people are like, you know, I would rather just spin up the second half of the address randomly so I wouldn't be afraid that somebody with bullets and badges could, you know, do whatever, or I'm, you know, all for privacy and whatever it might be. So that they came up with an alternative way to EUI64 that just automatically stirred it up. The way this is done varies by operating system and even varies between different versions of operating system. But the fact that I could look at this and instantly see that it didn't line up to my MAC address knew that I was using a automatically spun up SLAAC. Scott Jernigan, stateless LAN auto SLAAC. Scott Jernigan will put it up on the screen for you, see what it stands for. So this is a good thing. So that correlation isn't there. There you go, guys. I just gave you an example. I had to teach you something you didn't need to know. You think I've done this before. Okay. So now the other question you're going to have for me is, Mike, why are there 2 IPv6? Let me make sure you're seeing this. So why are there 2 of these internet addresses? Well, the answer is it really depends again on your operating system, but Windows is particularly notorious, especially earlier versions of Windows like Windows 8 and 8.1. Literally, like every time you made a new session and connected to something new, it would use a temporary address. So pretty much what happens today is that this is true in Windows and most Linux distros, is that it will spin up an IPv6 address, your global unicast, your internet address. This has nothing to do with that link local, folks. Ignore that FE80 while we're talking about this. And it will just change that once a day, once an hour, just depends on the OS and how that happens. And that's the temporary address. They both work great and they're interchangeable. And you know, Windows just decides we're going to make you a new temporary address. So there's never a correlation. So even if somebody wanted to track you, and if they tried to track you the next day, it would be a different address. So it's a security thing for you, and it's a good thing, and we like it. All right, so the other thing, let me scroll up. I just ran a regular ipconfig. Not there, sorry. There we go. So if you take a look, we still have things like, do you see default gateway? That's still there. And I'm too lazy to type it again, but if I went ahead and typed ipconfig/all, you'd have an IPv6 DNS server probably too. So this is the most important thing about IPv6. From a user standpoint, IPv6 doesn't change anything. I mean, we're still typing in www.google.com or checking your email and going to mail.totalsem.com, although you, as a user, you probably had somebody set that up for you. Because DNS. When you set up a DNS server today, you usually set up your regular A records, which is DNS, which we call your host records, but then you set up a quadruple A, 1, 2, 3, 4 A's, which is a host record for IPv6. And then that way, when you query a DNS server, for example, you query a DNS server for www.google.com, it really depends on the DNS server what will come down. And if they have both, Windows, for example, will go ahead and try to use the IPv6 address first. Now, from a user standpoint, you don't see any of this. So the analogy is like your speed dial on your contacts list. I don't know Dave Rush's phone number, but I've got a picture of him on my phone. I can open up my phone and find Dave Rush, and I can call him. I guess if I looked real close, I could see the phone dialing his number. If we ripped out the entire telephone system and changed it, as long as the DNS updates for this new system, everything's fine. So from a user standpoint, most people are on IPv6 networks all the time now and don't even know it. Pretty interesting. And here, let's take a look on my system here. Oops. I'm just firing up. I'm just typing netstat. Oh, come on. Here, I'll show you what I'm looking at. I don't see any IPv6 addresses. I'm just going to leave that up there because there will be IPv6 addresses. It's just showing IPv4 addresses first, and then the other ones will come shortly. So for right now, we'll just wait for that for a second. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about with IPv6, which is really, really important, is the concept of multicast. So in a TCP/IP network, we have different ways to transmit data among systems. So we have broadcast, unicast, and multicast, right? So let's make sure we know the difference between those guys. So first of all, here's a little typical 4-system network, and it's all wired, okay, nothing special there. So in a broadcast, we will send something with a 255 on the end. We could either send it out, this is the network ID for this IPv4 network, and then 255 is reserved for broadcast, or it could be 255.255.255.255. Yeah. And that is a broadcast. A broadcast means everybody on the network must listen to it. So they'll all hear it. Now, a unicast is when we send to a very specific individual address. In this particular case, and I'm just using IPv4 here again, I have a unicast address which is only going to go to one of these systems. That system that says yes happens to be 192.168.1.44. A multicast is kind of similar to a broadcast. I mean, what makes a system answer to a broadcast? And that's because there's something in there that says if a packet comes in for 192.168.1.255, pick it up and read it. So there's something kind of in the system, and it's all part of the original TCP IP, the IPv4 stack that says, if you see this kind of address, listen. Multicast is a little bit of a different animal. With multicast, what you have is something that's built into it that says very specific addresses must be listened to. So these addresses aren't even necessarily part of your network ID when you're talking about IPv6. Let me show you. So with a unicast, in this particular example, I'm going to send out something on FF02::1. So there's a whole bunch of zeros. You know, we're missing 6 hextets in there, right? Okay. Now, if you have a machine that is running IPv6, they will hear this. If you have a system that's not running IPv6, they're just going to ignore this. These individual commands are part of what it's generally called neighbor discovery protocol, but there's a lot more to it than that, in that there are these certain little commands that do really important things. So let's see if I can get this to come up. Yay, all right. So what I've done here, just so you can see, this is Wireshark, and you see I have sorted on what's called ICMPv6. That's how I can see these particular commands. And if we take a look, like, what would be an interesting one? Here's one right, oh, darn, don't click on that. So this is what we call a router solicitation. So this is a multicast address. And basically it's just being sent to all the IPv6 hosts on my network. And it's asking information about a router. So it's coming from, and you can see it all these use link local addresses, because these don't go through the internet. But I can come down in here, and it doesn't say very much. It just means I am looking for a router is what this particular system is saying. So we also have neighbor solicitations, and neighbor solicitations are basically asking to see who else is out there. They triple check to make sure nobody has the same IPv6 address. Here's a router advertisement. Can I make this? Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. There we go. So this is a router advertisement from this particular MAC address, which I just happen to know is my router because I double checked it before I did all this. And when we take a look at this, we can see that he is sending out an advertisement that says all kinds of interesting stuff. So if we scroll down in here a little bit, there's one little thing in here I'm going to make you ignore. Like, for example, here's the prefix right here. So it says, if you're going to join the internet, you're going to be 2600, 1700, D00, B460, then you put in the other half. So let's take a look at that real quick. So what I want to do is go back over. I'm missing things. There we go. Let's go back over to the command line. This stupid thing still hasn't... of course, it's because I tried to show it. That's what you get, Mike. All right, so... Let go. Let go. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to run an IP config here. Let me get up to the Ethernet card. There he is. Okay. All right. So if you take a look here, we're going to jump back and forth one more time because I'm not good at memorizing this stuff. So if we take a look here, it's coming from, here it is. So it's 2600, 1700, D00, B46. Now if we take a look here at the command line, you can see it says 2600, 1700, D00, B460. So basically what just happened there is you saw the router advertisement, which is shooting out via a multicast out to all of the individual IPv6 hosts, and it's saying this is the first half of your internet address. Go ahead and use that SLAAC to generate the other half. Pretty cool, huh? So IPv6 by default, and remember we don't have to worry about, so what are the things that we always counted on DHCP? We wanted your internet address, okay, you just saw that. You wanted the subnet mask, it's all WAC 64, so that's not even broadcast anymore. I guess it is, but it's not really important. You want to know where your default gateway is, right? So that's sent through that same router advertisement. And then your DNS server. So let's see how much of that's actually covered in there. I'm going to scroll this up so you guys get a better shot at seeing this. Okay, that I'm going to have you ignore for a minute, where it says /60. We'll talk about this later. But there's your DNS server. So that gives your DNS server information. And then it actually uses the, what is it? So it's a prefix. It's in here somewhere, but I'm not seeing it very, very quickly, which actually gives my default gateway as well. Or I guess really what happens here is the default gateway is calculated because it came from the router. So it's a router advertisement, therefore he must be the default gateway, and there's probably a little flag in there that confirms that. I don't remember where it is exactly. Okay. So that gives us kind of a rough idea. Hang on, one more thing. Yeah. So that gives you a rough idea of how IPv6 works. I want to get into IPv6 a little bit more deeply, but I wanted to get the questions for today, make sure that those were covered, and then we're going to take this another step deeper. We're actually going to go beyond what's ever going to show up on A+, Net+, or Security+, but I know the kind of questions you guys are going to ask because I asked them, and I want to fill that in a little bit. Like, for example, one of the things that IPv6 does offer is something called DHCP version 6. So DHCP version 6 is available because sometimes things get a little messed up. Like, for example, maybe you don't want to use the DNS server that your router is advertising. And so in that case, you would have a DHCP v6 server going, no, use this DNS server. That might be one example. Also, router advertisements only provide the bare minimum to get you on the internet. Give you an IP address. Your subnet mask is WAX64. It's going to give you a default gateway. It's going to give you a DNS server, and that's it. And you'd sit there and go, well, Mike, that's plenty, right? Well, no, sometimes it's not. Because sometimes you might want a network time server, or maybe you're supporting some older protocols where you need to support god-awful things like WINS or something like that. So DHCP version 6, although probably not necessary in the purest of pure IPv6 environments, is still out there and on just about every router. And Wednesday, we're going to dive into some routers and actually see some of these settings. So pretty much for the most part, this is all done automatically. ISPs will configure these things for us where the data is passed down. So it's actually kind of interesting because on my router, remember DHCP works both ways. So just like your home router is probably not only a DHCP server passing out DHCP information on this LAN, but it's also a DHCP client getting stuff from upstream. Most of the routers that we see out there today that are supporting IPv6 are DHCP version 6 clients. Because right now, that is the primary way, because you got to think about this. How does your router know what your prefix is going to be? And that's because he listens upstream. So he's going to get a router advertisement for him to connect to his upstream network, but he also gets router advertisement that says, going downstream, Mr. Router, this is what you're going to pass out to your clients. Cool, huh? Yeah, it is cool. All right, let's see how we're doing on questions here. And looks like people are figuring things out. All right. Just try to figure out where the questions are. I knew somebody would always ask that question. PvP boy, what happened to IPv5? No. Adam Topher, problem is I can memorize IP addresses in IPv4. In 6, it would be impossible for me. Yes, it would be impossible. Most systems will allow you to type in, is my camera on? Yes. Happy Mike. Okay. So, like you can go into Windows. Can I do this here without blowing anything up? So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go into, I'm just going to go down here and fire up my network. I don't want to make it any smaller because I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing here. All right, so there's all my IPv4 stuff, but now I'm going to go down to IPv6 and click on properties here. So if I wanted to, I can type in static IP addresses. I could type in a subnet prefix, even though by default it's always going to be WAC 64, right? It is. So why did Windows put that in there? Because they're thinking, well, one day they may want to change it. I could type in my default gateway manually, or I could do all this manually. But ooh, goodness, no, we don't want to do that. In fact, I'm going to just cancel out of there and close all that out because that's a mess. Because you want to take advantage of the beauty that is IPv6. It's so magical. But you don't want to memorize, you're never going to memorize addresses. I'll bet you'll be able to memorize your network ID. Andy STL, can the 4 quadruple zeros be substituted? Yeah, not only can one all zeros hextet, but if you have like 3 hextets in a row, they can all be concatenated to one double colon. So remember, when you're looking at your so if you take a look right here at the link local address, you'll see it's FE80::1, 2, 3, 4, right? So that means there's 3 more sets of 3 more hextets of all zeros right in there. Man, I got a lot of windows open. Okay. All right, so let's read some more questions. Adam Topher, why is my IP address 1245:555:. You are missing a double colon in there somewhere, brother. Oops, I missed one in the middle. It had a double. Okay, Adam, you got to figure it out. Good man. I don't have a good source for A+ flashcards. Usually, to me, I always like people to make their own flashcards because just the practice of making the flashcards is often just good practice right there. Network maps. If NAT is gone, then how are private host IPs concealed? They're not. The main thing that you're just going to be doing good firewalls. And most of the stateful firewalls that are coming from the ISPs today have all that built in. So you cannot hide yourself. The idea of hiding is kind of gone. That's why when I tell people that it's going to be really hard to scan a local area network, then the bad guys are going to go, fine, I'll just wait and grab the traffic heading out because it's going to have their IP address in it and I can get it from there too. But things like shutting off IP, ICMP, so stuff like that is done by default now. But you have a public address. Yeah, this is no more port forwarding. It's going to be gone. The whole concept of port forwarding and port triggering will become meaningless. Now, you're going to have some pretty powerful ACLs in your routers that are going to be double checking stuff. But yeah, the whole concept of port forwarding with IPv6 no longer makes sense. PvP Poi, can we run out of MAC addresses? The nice part is that on the outside chance that I have never seen 2 devices have the same MAC address. at the same time. Never happened. So, and remember, MAC addresses only have to be unique within the LAN itself. They don't have to be unique on the entire internet. Yeah, Adam nailed it right there, Ed. It's only going to be a problem if you have two devices that are on the same LAN. Isn't that a secure MAC plus IP? Yeah, I think we've already covered that. That we really, even though we can do that because of Slack, we don't have to worry about that. You don't have to spoof it because all of the operating systems automatically generate random ones for you. My IPv6 is off. I'd turn it on, man. It's pretty cool features. Oh, on the router. Okay, well, you know, Adam, is your ISP providing IPv6 addresses? I mean, turn it on your router. We should probably talk about what turning it on the router means, and it's going to take a while to do that, so we'll do that on Wednesday. Stateless address auto configuration. Thank you, Scott. As always, I never remember what these things stand for because they're not important. Adam Topher, I've considered disabling IPv4 fully and going IPv6. See what it does. I've done that, and you usually have big trouble. It's just because a lot of websites, you know, mail servers, stuff like that are still IPv4. All of DNS has been converted to IPv6. But like even the Total Seminars website, we were not IPv6 capable until pretty recently, like maybe this year. I'm going to double check with Michael Smyer, but we just didn't think to turn it on. But the cool thing is, Adam, go ahead and try it because there's just going to be websites you can't get to. That's all it's really going to boil down to for you. Yeah. Go for it. It'll be interesting. Zach Murphy, hey kid. Hi Mike, my MAC address keeps changing for some reason. What do you think is wrong? Your MAC address, you always give me interesting questions. So when you type ipconfig/all, and you pick, like here's my Ethernet adapter here, right? You're telling me this MAC address changes? It can be done. Like you can go into a lot of, like in Device Manager and actually make changes to MAC addresses. You can, most routers will allow you to spoof a MAC address on the WAN side, which can often be very convenient if you're like putting in a new router and you don't want your ISP to freak out. You just give your new router the same MAC address as your old router, stuff like that. But so when you say my MAC address, on what, Zach? On your smartphone? Are you typing ipconfig/all and you're seeing it change? How do you know it changes? That's the other thing, because no offense, brother, but MAC addresses is not something I look at every day, you know? If you type in regular ipconfig, it doesn't even show up. You have to type ipconfig/all. So why do you think your MAC address is changing, Zach Murphy? Because I'd be curious about that. Network Mage, Windows 10 version 1909 went to automatic, and you have to run a netsh command if you actually want to use EUI64. Why anybody would do that, I have no idea. Yeah, Adam, you're Win 10. Okay, Zach Murphy, you keep saying it's changing. How do you know it's changing? Are you running ipconfig/all and seeing it change? You know, you guys got something going here. I'm going to let y'all do your due. Kind of run a little low on time here. Yeah, I'm always a little behind. Sorry, guys. Azads, can you please explain proxy server? I'll tell you what. Azads, we can make it easier than that. What I need you to do, Azads, this is for you. I need you to go back go on the Total Seminars channel, and you'll see all of these videos that look like the exact same thing, but they're not. One of them will say on there proxy server. Was it VPN and proxy servers that day? I don't remember. But we did a great class on there about 2 weeks ago on proxy servers. So Azad, please go back, find that video, watch that video, and then ask me questions. I thought it was one of the better days we had on AMAs here, and I'm very proud of it, and I think it will answer your questions beautifully. So please, please, please go through after this thing's done, dig through. We've only got 10 more minutes. Dig through there and find something that says proxy server. It's literally in the little icon, and watch that. You'll be very, very happy. Rafi, hello. Can I ask for more time exam because of language? Well, Rafi, you got to keep in mind with the CompTIA exams, they come in many, many languages. So you might want to consider if you have a more, native tongue, you might want to take it in that. Can you ask for more time because of language? I think you can, but it's something you have to plan for ahead of time. When you actually register for the exam, there are some options in there where you have to make that, and it's in the form of a request. They won't automatically give it to you. And I think they give you like an extra 15 minutes, maybe 30. I forget what that is. So the answer is yes. Also do keep in mind you can take the CompTIA exams come in many, many languages. And so if you have a native language, that might be the better way to go as well. Crimson Warrior. I just saw your announcement for AWS certification. And what kinds of jobs would you want to know AWS? Who uses AWS databases, and who do you think more companies are going, and do you think more companies are going to adopt AWS? Is it more companies are going to adopt it? It's just AWS becomes more and more complicated. AWS, as a cloud provider, provides a dizzying number of products. Just, it's unreal. There's a big security company here in Houston, and all they do is they have a little plug-in. So if you and I want to set up a website, so we set up our website and it's like, hey, do you want 24-hour security from, can't remember the name of the company, it's going blank. And you pay $30 to $100 a month, and they have human beings who are constantly watching it. Obviously they have to be very, very comfortable with AWS cloud in general and AWS in particular, so that they can make sure that their product ties in properly with them and all that kind of stuff. So not only yes, more companies are going to do it, and the companies that are doing it, there's always more bells and whistles. AWS is all cloud services are all growing at very, very high rates of speed in terms of what they offer and how that offer manifests itself. So yes. In what kind of jobs would you want to know AWS? Well, I just gave you one example. Any job that interfaces with AWS. Like here at Total Seminars, Michael Smyer just got we moved a bunch of stuff over from a much more, I don't want to talk about the older technology we used to use, and into AWS now. And it was a big job, and it took a lot of work. Who uses AWS databases? Anybody who uses a database. Oil companies here in Houston have massive databases there. It's just, I'm pretty sure we use AWS databases. I'd have to ask Michael Smyer, but yeah, lots of people. You guys are all just talking amongst each other. Guitar Madness, can you please explain IPsec? Yeah, I'll give you a quick answer, and we'll see that if it's acceptable for you. When the internet was first designed, there was no security of any form. There was no encryption of any form. and it was ugly. So encryption started to show up, arguably mainly because of websites and e-commerce and things like that initially. But when you look at the OSI model, there's all the encryption is up in the higher levels, right? Application level, if you want to look at it that way. Some people might want to call it at a session level, depending on how you look at those things. But there's nothing at layer 3. There's nothing at the internet level, the network level, to provide security. That's what IPsec was designed for. IPsec, Secure IP, came out. It was originally designed for IPv6, and IPsec was designed to encrypt from a point-to-point standpoint anything that was coming out of your system or coming into your system. So it was point-to-point encryption, and it's a very, very powerful tool. It just never got really adopted. IPsec works primarily in what we call a tunneling methodology, similar to SSH. And while it didn't get a lot of, nobody really used it for IPv6, the one place we do use IPsec quite a bit for is for VPNs. It's one of many technologies that allow VPNs to work. So that is IPsec. IPsec works at layer 3 of the OSI model. It's the only thing that does. Everything else works above it or in a couple of cases below it. If that's not good enough, I can give you more, but not today with only 4 minutes left. All right, well, it looks like, oh, here we go. When it says in your local address preferred over what? Well, preferred basically just, Windows 10 has changed the way it treats IPv6 addresses. When Windows 10 first came out, you would have a ton of IPv6 temporary addresses. And the preferred ones were the ones where Microsoft would only update it once a day, but individual applications could and still can, if they want, say, look, spin me up a new temporary IPv6 account, IPv6 address for just this. So the preferred is the relatively fixed one, for lack of a better term. All right, well, it looks like there's all kinds of conversations going on, and I don't want to turn anybody off too quick. But what I want to do is, oh man, you guys definitely give me some marching orders for tomorrow or Wednesday. So I'm going to look at that Quad 9 in details. We'll do DISM on Wednesday. I'm writing this all down so I don't forget. So we'll have a quick discussion on Quad 9. And again, thank you. I forgot who showed that to me, but I really appreciate it. I love cool stuff like that. And we'll do DISM. I can, and again, I'm going to write down proxy server, but you're going to have to ask me more questions. If you've got particular questions, because I had such a good video on it, I don't feel it's necessary to repeat that. But that is about all I've got going. Fun stuff coming up next month. We're going to have Elaine Batzler from North Essex High School. Going to be coming down. She's going to physically be here. She just needs to get out of Massachusetts. So I said, come on down. I am still looking for some people to talk to. It's not that I'm sure people are more than willing. It's just that I haven't bothered to make enough calls. But if there's any particular person out there who you would like to talk with on the internet or training personality or anybody like that, let me know. Worst they can do is say no. And I'm absolutely fearless about talking to just about anybody. But other than that, I think that's going to wrap it up for today for us. So please come back next Wednesday. Also remember that we have the 50% off deal. So all you have to do is go to www.totalsim.com and type in the code. Scott Jernigan will type that in for us one more time. It goes MMLive517. Oh, there, Scott's got it. MMLive615. And get 50% off of our super bundles and individual practice questions. So until then, folks, this is your Uncle Mike saying good night, and I'll see you Wednesday. Good night.